Want me to start? I see people are joining, so we'll wait a little bit. Hi, everyone. I'm Eleni Gerbla-Collier, and I manage the Overseas Department at the Jewish Federation of Cleveland. And I am really just thrilled to moderate this panel on this very dreary Cleveland day, but appreciate those that have joined us on Zoom and also our distinguished panelists. On behalf of Global Cleveland, I wanted to thank our sponsors, Eaton Corporation, Sedglock, Cleveland Hungarian Development Panel, the University of Akron, Rotary Club of Cleveland, Lithuanian American Community, Slovenian Museum and Archives, the City of Cleveland, and the Cleveland Public Library. The Jewish Federation of Cleveland has been involved in a partnership with the city of Beit She'an and the Valley of the Springs since 1995. And several years ago, really with the help of Global Cleveland, we formed an official sister city relationship. We have a whole range of things that we do through our partnership. Today, we're going to focus on our work together in STEM education. Just for those that do not know, Beit She'an is a city in the north of Israel. It's about an hour north of Jerusalem and has about 19,000 people that live there. So it's a much smaller place than Cleveland. Those who live in Beit She'an often have less opportunities, both educational opportunities and career opportunities, as compared to people who live in a major city like Tel Aviv, which is really the hub of economic activity in Israel. The Jewish Federation in 2018 formed STEM Israel that focuses on bringing STEM education to disadvantaged populations in Israel to equip students for 21st century skills. And those that are on the panel today have really been co-creating this partnership with us. So I'm really excited to have all of you. I'm going to just introduce all of you and then launch in. We have Jan Morrison, who is the founder and CEO of TIES, that stands for Teaching Institute for Excellence in STEM, and has been really instrumental in all our STEM work in Israel. We have Ebony Hood, who is the director of the NeoSTEM ecosystem here, and is really focused very much on how education can help with equity issues. And Dorit Natan-Levy is the director of our partnership between Cleveland, Beit She'an, and the Valley of the Springs. So thank you so much for all being here. And Jan, I'm going to start with you. And if you can sort of explain what, we use this word STEM ecosystem, maybe just say what STEM is, because I often feel that people think it's literally those letters, and I know it's much more, and what a STEM ecosystem is.
Thank you, Eleni, and thank you for your kind words. It's been all the work over these years with you, the Federation, and certainly with our partners in Israel have been really a labor of love. Let me start with STEM. STEM is in its third decade in America. It started out exactly as you said, science, technology, engineering, and math. And we talked literally about the academic implications of that and the impact of teaching and learning that would bring in all of those disciplines. It has, over the years, transformed into what its rightful place. And STEM is now a mindset. It is the opportunity to bring together and help children and any learner to understand how the world works. And then how we as people, as mankind, innovate around that to solve problems and to create tools and to create a planet and live in that planet, solving our grandest of challenges. So in our third decade in America, that's how we see it. And and the globe, around the globe, those countries that have been in this pursuit for as long as we have really see the same thing. Israel is on its way to that understanding. And that's really quite important. Early on in the work, what we found is at the municipal level in America, cities, state level, towns, villages, were struggling to understand how to implement that. What did it mean for each, whether you're an educator, whether you were in workforce and all of that. And what we found in STEM in America is that we had tons and tons of programs that started to grow in STEM. And in fact, number 2 in the GDP in education in our country. But it didn't have any kind of impact that really made a difference in our workforce so that our children would see themselves in STEM professionally. So we said, time out. What is it going to take? And a decade ago said it will take infrastructure. It takes us to understand how to act together and create relationships amongst educators, amongst employers, amongst government and nonprofits, so that we act as an ecosystem where there's work being done together, there's energy that goes through the system to empower all of us together to provide the kind of STEM education that we all want for our children. That was the birth of the STEM ecosystems in America. We are now up to 100. And in January, it'll be 6 years that notion came to Israel as well, with the same idea that, and facing the communities that are really struggling, and with families that are the poorest of families, with the most magnificent children that come into the world with the greatest horsepower and probably the least opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jan. And Ebony, could I turn over to you to describe a little bit more about what the STEM ecosystem is in Cleveland and how Cleveland students have benefited, as Jan described, from this ecosystem?
Sure, and I'm so glad to be under like Jan's umbrella for this work. It's been inspirational, if I might add, and I have learned a lot in my short role with the NEO-STEM ecosystem here in Cleveland. So one of the things I've observed once I've landed this position is the networking opportunities to help our peers. Our youth has been like undeniably the best thing that I've ever seen come to fruition. So what Jan is describing, like, we have education at the table and, the workforce teams and, our industry partners, I get to see it in action. So from our monthly meetings, I get to see people coming together, talking about where the needs are, where are the gaps, and how can those be filled on a grassroots level, like in our actual neighborhood. So when you say how are students being served, we can extend STEM learning in ways that have never been touched before, because we have people at the table that see firsthand where the problems are and we can begin to address them. So even if we think about systems of like state education, those are the ones that set up the standards and the requirements, student must pass X for grade level, 2, 3, 4, and on. We get to fill in like our out of school time to support that learning for students. And that's what our ecosystem has been able to do to serve in a meaningful way, again, by filling in the gaps, be it a library program that focuses on literacy. Well, now we get to bring STEM to literacy. How can we have like a student that's reading that same book, but now the book focuses on STEM topics. We can talk about engineering and design and the sciences. You can bring in all those tools just with a little shift that probably wasn't at the forefront of conversations before without having a STEM ecosystem there to talk about it. So that's just one example of how, we've been able to impact in a small way, but in a much meaningful way.
Thank you very much, Ebony. Dorit, could you share with us what is STEM in Beit She'an and what the STEM ecosystem is? I know, right, Beit She'an is a much newer ecosystem, and it's nice to point out, the differences.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, it's a big privilege to be here and even talk about it, because I remember where we started. And when we talk about the STEM ecosystem in Beit She'an, I have to say this is like to see a dream come true. When we started, the gaps were so big. I remember that Jen came and told us about this whole STEM concept, and we thought, oh, it can only happen in America. Beit She'an is the deep periphery of Israel. It's the deep periphery of Israel. It's really the gap between the center of Israel and where Beit She'an is located, and the opportunities, and even the basic methodology of teaching in Beit She'an is so different than how kids learn in the center of Israel. So when Jen told us about this whole STEM concept, we were overwhelmed and we were skeptical. And today the ecosystem of Beit She'an has parents, teachers, universities, people that in different employment fields around Beit She'an. We're trying to make that bigger too. Kindergarten, everyone are involved, and to see everyone so involved and also so passionate about learning more and doing more under this umbrella of STEM, for me is really like seeing a dream come true. So yeah, today it is all of these things.
Thank you. So Ebony, when you talk about the ecosystem here, it sounds like similar to how Dolly described. There's a lot of different organizations involved in the ecosystem. Can you give some specific examples of who besides, right, the education community, which I think is is clear. What's the surround that really makes it an ecosystem that really leverages this work in the education community?
Okay, great question. So I'll give it from from the perspective of an event that we had here in Cleveland, a Score with STEM event. It was partnered with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, we were talking about a major, basketball team coming to NeoSTEM saying, help us, bring STEM to the community in a meaningful way. With that, now you're leveraging all the partners. So the participant would be, let's say, the students, the education, that platform. They're the ones who is receiving the benefits, but who offered those benefits are all the surrounding people at the table. So you're talking about, someone like Girl Scouts to our industry partners, Highland, and I can just go on and on naming them. Even our big institutions like our museums, our science centers, all these folks have a presence at that event to activate STEM. And you get to step back and clearly see what that looks like, even on a grassroots scale. So even individuals that care about STEM, we had a mother and son team talking about finances, as an exhibit for this event. So we really can activate from industry all the way down to individual grassroots folks from the community at that space to deliver STEM learning for those students. So that was probably the best example of seeing all the partners at play up under one roof that was led by a huge NBA franchise. Like, how cool is that? So
That's
you
amazing.
can see, you can see the power of how STEM, just the idea of connecting STEM to sports. And you think about the jobs behind, the sports and workforce development, you just layer in all these opportunities to not only learn, but to also think about careers. Just amazing. So again, another small example of seeing how things work, but that event really shed a light on how many different partners are at the table in the ecosystem.
Great, thank you very much. And Dolit, could you give a little more texture to the STEM ecosystem? Maybe if you could talk about some signature programs that are being developed in Beit She'an that leverage the partners as part of the ecosystem.
Yes, definitely. Look, I think that in Beit She'an, we did not follow the model. We jumped a few steps ahead and then went back. I mean, it was hard to do it because our starting point was not ideal. We did not have the cooperation of the municipality that just changed. So that forced us to actually start with the kids themselves. So we turned to the kids, and we understood that we also need to engage the parents of the kids in order to make it successful. Because if the parents will not understand what the kids are learning, nothing will come out of it. The kids can be super excited, but they will not have the support of the parents, and then everyone will be left alone. So we started with a program, with a pilot program of parents and kids together. And after the first meeting, the parents started a group in which they wanted to already buy like 3D pens and things that they were not familiar with until a day before. The parents became excited. They encouraged the kids. The kids were excited, and we also created work together. And we understood that this is something that actually works. We understood that the kids can bring it to the community, and it doesn't have to come from the municipality and all the way down. So this is how we started it. One of the most amazing programs that we have is called Scientific Leadership. And these are teens that, again, in order to even train them, we had to encourage the parents and push them to allow their kids to go through the training. And the night before they went on the training, many parents called and canceled. They said they're not going to send their kids, and we had to force them kind of to just give it a try. So it started, the kids loved it. The teenagers started training the elementary school kids. And later, the teachers were inspired by the teenagers, and they learned from them methods. A year later, there were 3 times as many kids that wanted to apply for the program, and then the program kept growing and growing. So I think that for sure, this is one of our flag programs, because the teens make an impact, and they make an impact on the closer circle of their families, their parents, their younger brothers, sisters, neighbors, and also the teachers that understood that they need to teach in a different way than the way they used to.
It's a great example. Jan, as somebody who's been really obviously instrumental both in Beit She'an and in Cleveland, can you share what you've seen happening in Beit She'an and some similarities with Cleveland over the years?
Well, I think children and families are children and families. And I think the great love and desire to see your child rise to their potential and to be part of that is overwhelming. And I think that there's no difference between the neighborhoods in Cleveland than there are in the neighborhoods in the municipality of Beit She'an. When you, as Dorit said, and what Ebony have said, when you give them the opportunity and the pathway and show them the way that they can be a part of their children's lives in a different way, and have trust and respect for the institutions around them that are helping them, like the ecosystems, like the Boys and Girls Clubs, or like others that Beit She'an has, then you have it. I also want to say too that this is a matter of looking at a trajectory. Both Cleveland and Beit She'an are looking at a child's full educational life, in and out of school, and from the very youngest of times to career. That's another similarity that's really critical. So when, as Dorit has mentioned, when Beit She'an understood what was possible, they have scaled what's called the Lockheed Martin kindergartens that started in Beersheba and Matakids. And the kindergarten is an amazing STEM environment and course of study and set of instruction. And seeing what was possible there, we had already started working on that here, not only in Cleveland, but in the nation with our early childhood Fab Labs. And I have now said over and over again with Pre for CLE, how can we bring Matakids to Pre for CLE? You know, how can NeoSTEM in this next couple of years take what's working beautifully in Israel? So it isn't really just a one-way street here. It isn't just America having these great ideas and bringing them to Israel. It is a partnership. It's a sister city. We need to really take that seriously, and I think we are. So I think those trajectories are really critical. And I also think that trust is everything. And that's what both ecosystems have really garnered at every level.
That's wonderful. To any of you, how do you see ways to expand and deepen this partnership between Cleveland and Beit She'an?
May I?
Please.
All right. So I was excited listening to Dorit explain about the parent group that spun off, because they were so excited about STEM learning. So it made me think about the Score with STEM event with the Cleveland Cavaliers. That was a family-friendly event. So you had parents, bringing their kids down with them, but the learning experience was for everyone. So it wasn't necessarily about, parents just waited for their kids to have this experience. They experienced, all these different facets of STEM together. So I would like to learn more about how can I get a parent group that's excited about STEM? Like if you can imagine a group, so like once the event is over, they're reaching out to NeoSTEM saying, okay, give me my contact list. We're going to start meeting up on Thursdays or whatever it is, for their particular communities. That would be a win for me to have our parents show up in a meaningful way within our ecosystems as well. We know that they care. We know that they want to be at the forefront of their child's education, but sometimes, it takes a little catalyst to get things started. So that I can see as a learning opportunity. Like, please tell me, what prompted it? What are you learning from it? How do we get it going? Again, there's endless opportunities for sharing stories and sharing like missteps and making corrections along the way for real opportunities.
What a nice example, Ebony. Dorit.
I can't wait to already schedule the meeting where we'll talk about it. So yeah, for me, it's like, wow, there's so many things that we can and already learn and will learn. But I think our biggest gap at the moment, we have two big gaps that I think that we can definitely learn from Cleveland. One is the time that you're already doing it. You have been there way before us. So you have experience, and we feel that even though now we already get STEM, we kind of want to take it to the next level, and you already know how to go to the next level. So this is one thing I think we can definitely learn from you. And the second thing is the whole employment and STEM connection, which is a bit harder. It's working a bit harder for us, especially, again, as I said, we are in the deep periphery, and the employment opportunities are limited. But I know we've heard from Jen that this is something that can be done. So this is something that I'm looking forward to keep learning from your successes and from your failures.
To those of you who are listening, if you have a question, please use the question and answer box on your Zoom screen and enter in a question for our panelists, and we'll go ahead and get it answered. So if there are, we're obviously part of Global Cleveland Sister City Conference, and Cleveland, I don't remember the number offhand, but has a number of really, as sister cities all over the world. Jan, do you know if there are other, if you have recommendations for any other sister city of how to get connected, or if you know of any other sister city relationships with STEM?
Well, we were looking at that the other day, and I think there are potentially some, and I can't pinpoint the sister cities at the moment, but I think that's a good thing to do. I think Cleveland has always has made commitments for the last century to an international footprint and level of communication. We've had consulates here, many over the years, which is what spawned the creation of Global Cleveland. So I think we host well, we understand the constraints and the advantages, and I think the sister city opportunities are really abundant. I would say that more and more in the global community of practice for these ecosystems that countries are coming in. We right now are in the process of designing Iceland. Iceland as an entire country has decided that that is to their advantage, to truly understand the infrastructure that's needed. Mexico is expanding. Canada is looking to expand. Kenya is, the ecosystem in Kenya is run out of the presidents of the country's office and now has a significant partnership with Pennsylvania and the ecosystem in central Pennsylvania to do the kinds of work that neither would do separately. So there are examples, and it strikes me, and it's a great question, that Cleveland is ground zero for this, and certainly global Cleveland. If we can help everybody to make those kinds of connections, they're only going to be better. And ones who would benefit from the structure, we're happy to help with that and bring them in. It should be, you know, there's no membership fee. There's nothing that says, oh, you have to strike a box and pay a fortune to be part of this. That's not how this works. The idea is that it penetrates to our children and our communities and helps.
So inspiring to hear the range of countries that are involved in this. And I love what you said earlier about, right, one would think Cleveland and kids in Beit She'an have a lot of differences. And I loved how you said, you know, at the end of the day, children and their families really all want the same thing, and that, you know, outlook globally, I think, really helps place ties to really lead this because, right, I think that is very true, but it's not very obvious, I think, to most people. So that's spectacular. A question that we're getting is around the word STEM. And, you know, there's a lot of people who say STEM, some people say STEAM, and the role of arts in STEM education. If you could address that, Jan and Ebony and Dolit, if you have comments as well.
So I want to say that the word STEM was cast in the year 2000, and it was always assumed that the process of design would be embedded in it. There's no way to have the arts without STEM and vice versa. Whether you add the A or you don't, it is most authentic when the arts are a part of that. So whatever's the comfort level, the real authentic nature of this is the fact that it would be included. And we're not just talking about digital arts like gaming and like set design. We're talking about at least that, not only that. And I'm sure Ebony has experienced this as well.
Yeah, I have. I was going to say, and maybe this is a cop-out, but I was going to say, whatever we need to call it to bring someone to the table that feels excluded, then let's add the extra letters, you know, because STEM is there for everyone. And some people find difficulty seeing that. And we have to open up the door and show them all the layers of how things connect, especially like in the arts world. I've had numerous people who even told me that in our NeoSTEM meetings, and I can tell you one individual, she's a creative and she's still at the table. Like she's coming, you know, month after month, she's coming and she swore up and down that she was not connected to STEM in any way. And I'm like, you have no idea how deeply you're connected to this like way of thinking for design. So for me, I am not anti, like, oh, it has to be a certain way. Again, I would say you use whatever acronyms are going to draw people in so they can feel like they see themselves in this work, you know, in this, you know, evolution of thought. And I think it's the way forward, absolutely the way forward for us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So I'm happy you brought it up because it's important to say, you know, in Israel, we speak Hebrew. We don't speak English. STEM is in English. Many people, one of our struggles is actually the English language. So you come with this STEM word that doesn't mean anything to anyone, mm-hmm. and it's in letters that are not Hebrew letters. And then you want to tell all our educators, take this word that you don't understand and it's not in your language and implement it in your community. So, and you know, so first of all, before we even start understanding what STEM is, we ask, what do the letters mean? And then immediately, especially in a community like the community around Beit She'an, and around Beit She'an, there's also a place called the Valley of Springs. where there are a lot of religious people or traditional people. For them, at the beginning, it sounded terrible to do science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Like, how do you teach Bible? And there are so many farmers there. How do you teach the love of the land if you're only teaching these, these fields? So actually, I think we made Jen work very hard on answering all these questions for us and helping us understand that it's not really just STEM, and it's also STEAM, and also that we can do STEM in Bible too. And I think that one of the most fascinating STEM classes I've ever seen was actually teaching Bible. I can definitely relate to the question from our angle.
But I think also, Dorit, what is indicative of that is when you walk into Beit She'an and you go to a meeting or wherever you're gathering, there are signs that say STEM She'an. And if you go into Emek Ma'ayanot, which is the Valley of Springs, it says STEM Ma'ayanot. So there's an identity that's been created that I think they've worked very, very hard at and are proud of, enough to the point that they can actually tell the world, as you're entering our geographic, where we live and what we call home, we self-defined with STEM. And I think the moment that happened, then definitions weren't the issue. It was how you live it and how it's demonstrated and how it advances and provides opportunity for all who are there. The children, yes, for sure, but all families, the farmers, the part of agritech, the technology world there, the IT world, that's so profound in Israel, and even in the periphery, it's profound.
You reminded me, I wanted to share, often when we say that we're working on STEM in Israel, I think the reaction a lot of people have is Israel is such a high-tech country, which is true. And there's so many startups in Israel that they're usually people's immediate reaction is, why would Israel need a STEM program? And I think, the reality is that there's deep inequality in Israel. And even though there are parts of the country that have tremendous access to this sort of top-notch learning and the mindset you described, that's not true for all of Israel. And the areas the Federation is focused on is really disadvantaged areas of Israel that don't have access. And their teachers didn't have the tools to sort of shift their own mindset and bring this new type of learning forward. So I wanted to mention that. Ebony, I wanted to ask you a question. What it really inspires you in your work in Neo-STEM? I actually have never met you in person, but you have an energy and an excitement about this work, and I was curious what really drives you and motivates you in it.
Gosh, well, I'll say first and foremost, if I think about Black and Brown communities, so obviously, I'm a Black woman in America, and to hear that there's a struggle with an identity with STEM, I can tell you that holds true in our country and my communities, where it's still hard to have people even identify that they too can be a STEM, learner. So even though we have our English language and it was designed for us, the identity, if it doesn't resonate, it still doesn't mean anything. And that's been a struggle in the community. So one of the things that I love about my personal walk is that somewhere along the path, I drank the Kool-Aid. I drank the STEM Kool-Aid and I fell in love. And it was, it was probably like a bumpy road and a few exposure opportunities here or there. I didn't have parents necessarily that I thought, represented, a STEM career or anything like that, because again, in my childhood, no one was thinking about that kind of stuff anyway. So for me, the passion and the energy comes from, if I was converted, I know someone else can. And not saying that it's a rite of passage, it's just a way of being. It's exciting. Like you get to kind of like wear a badge when you have a mindset that thinks like in a logical sense, that can bring in the arts and plug them into that same level of learning. Like maybe I had to like do a rap or a dance to get someone's attention, and that's okay. So that's how I feel about my journey, because I feel like I was converted. I too can bring others along to let them see like the glory it is, and just opening up, to that STEM space. Plus, another thing that I love, love, love about innovation and technology, it's forever changing. And if kids do have access, even the ones in our broken communities that may have access to a phone that doesn't have service, but they're waiting on free Wi-Fi to use it, those type of things. In such a tiny model, we can kind of bridge the gap to talk about all the learning, all the technology, all the concepts that goes into something that they're very familiar with, and bringing that back around. So that's what drives me. It just, because I know that it takes very little to get someone on board through like hands-on learning, or to have like something resonate with them as something they care about. Maybe it's water issues in their school, all these different things they can bring back around. And that excites me. So again, along my path, I bit it, I bit the little STEM bug, and I just want to share that with everyone that I come encounter with.
You just exude an excitement about this that is, I'm sure, so infectious for all those people who work with you. It's really beautiful. Dorit, can you share what really has driven you to do this work, and what's motivated you to really focus so much on this kind of education?
Well, I think, it touches all of us in a very personal place. I'm actually a bit embarrassed to say that I was never exposed to any of these fields. And no one tried to encourage me to do that either. My focus was always on the social issues. And I didn't understand that even as a parent, that I'm not encouraging my kids to learn these fields or get these skills. And therefore, I'm actually preventing my kids from having all the opportunities that they can have for their own future. And kind of when Cleveland decided to invest in the STEM field in Beit She'an and the Valley Springs and other communities in Israel, I was forced to learn what STEM was all about. And like, it really, suddenly I understood how I'm like with my own hands, and I can change the life of my kids if I will just expose them or just give them the opportunities, and they don't have to choose it. But now I am so aware, and I'm telling you that I kind of forced my child now to register to a course which I know he's going to love, about like this space. And this is something that in the past I would never even double think, because he would do soccer, he would do basketball, and I would just try to make sure that he will be a good person, and that would be enough. And I understand that it's not enough if I want my kids to really have a better future. So I have, of course, the professional level of, I just want STEM to succeed because I know it can give the kids of Beit She'an and the Valley Springs a better future. But really, on a personal level, it also really affected me.
Jan, do you have anything to add about really what's driven you in this work?
Well, I think what's always driven me is the fact that children are born into their own situation, not of their own making. And it has always been a thing for me, even through 35 years of teaching, that we have to make the access, there has to be equity in access, because then they will realize their own potential. But that access has to have, the word is equity, and it can't be just in school. It has to be a life well lived. And you have to understand what it takes to solve the grandest of challenges, because our planet is profuse with them. So in order to do all of that, it's going to take all of us. And I think from the earliest of ages, I found that STEM, I wasn't just learning STEM, but I was doing it in community service. I was finding that if I could help and be part of solving a problem using what knowledge and competencies I had in the STEM field, that it got me even further than just the work that I was doing. But I was born into a STEM family. There was no question. My father was a full-fledged practicing physician by the age of 19. And my mother was on the Manhattan Project as you know, a hotshot young chemist. So there was an assumption being made, but that assumption doesn't mean that then you turn and it extends to others or to the planet itself. And I think that that's the greatest thing with this acronym, is it is helping children to make sense of the world, but it is also the understanding that the grandest of challenges are in their hands. And they may have been our own making, but that the solutions are in their hands. And Dory, your young children and are going to be the future. They are the future, my grandchildren, and so on, and Ebony, you know, and that's an important piece. I think that's what's always been the motivation for me.
There's so many, you know, there's so many things in the world that, you know, we all wish can be different. And it's so just beautiful to hear all of you speak in such an inclusive manner and an encouraging manner that this is really for everybody. And it's not just about your own personal learning. It's really about changing the world together and dealing with those grandest challenges. So I really want to thank Dorit, Jan, and Ebony for being with us today. And I want to thank Global Cleveland for putting on this panel. I know there is another Zoom session at 2:45 that is focusing on, I think, the history of sister cities and a film panel. And I want to thank again our sponsors for the Global Cleveland Sister City Conference. And for those who are there in person, I am told there is lunch at 12:30 at the Cleveland Public Library, which I'm very sorry to miss. But thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you for those that are joining us virtually. It's really been a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And good evening to Dorit and Israel. So long. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.